Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, State Treasurer Monica Mazzapelli. So I just wanted to share a few points. I just include a few points for your consideration. So I can go over those points. I know this bill relates to the contingent credit limit related to the BFA. So if I may, I would like to start with full disclosure. I'm a member of the board of the BFA, so I fully support the board of the BFA and the efforts to support economic development. I don't take a position on the bill, but today I obviously wearing the state treasurer's hat. And so I can speak about essentially math, what relates to the debt, the state issues that we manage, and particularly the debt limit calculation, which is pursuant to RSA 66. We just issued the debt affordability study we issue annually. I released that on Friday. Copies with you if you're interested. And that usually, that is an analysis we prepare to review the status of the state's liabilities, how much debt we have, and we project future debt, and to see how our debt portfolio looks, considering we review debt ratios, and we review again the status of where the state is as it relates to its liabilities. So, but the debt affordability. So we typically look at the debt affordability study and the formula that is established in RSA 66. So the RSA 66 essentially has provides that cap. The legislature cannot approve additional debt if it exceeds 10%, if debt service actual and projected exceeds 10% of unrestricted revenue. Essentially, the capacity is really driven by unrestricted revenues. So I haven't finalized that, but the draft shows that we are utilizing approximately 65% of that capacity. So that includes net tax supported debt, which is the debt that the state issues, and the debt that the state guarantees for programs like the BFA and other programs. The document I just shared with you has the points, and on the back it has is an excerpt of the state's ACFR, which the guaranteed debt is essentially liability. The state is contingently liable for all that debt. So that's the current picture of how much the state right now is contingently liable for programs that it supports. So again, the state right now, based on that recent calculation, has approximately 120 million in additional capacity. When I was coming here, I was actually, going into the weekend, I was thinking about two bills that were outstanding. I was thinking about this bill and also housing, which I know have plenty of conversations with Representative Moons about a guarantee program supporting housing. I know that's not it's not in question anymore. That was voted down last week. So we're only talking about this debt. So again, before I was a little more concerned about 550 million. Today, the additional 250 million is not as concerning. But again, it does impact the debt calculation for the state. So with that in mind, if 250 million is approved, that will leave approximately 570 million in capacity available for future state issues, and that will include your capital budgets, and that includes, this committee and the legislature has had discussions about building a prison, so that, perhaps will impact the ability to do a project like that. And again, additional the state the state, instead of being contingently liable for 200 million related to the BFA, it will increase to 450 million. So those are just facts that it just wanted to share with you. The rating, the credit rating of the state is not really impacted by, these programs, especially the BFA has a long history of running the state guarantees and utilizing them in a way that has worked for the state. So that is not an immediate concern when it comes to the credit rating. It would if those programs, if the state would actually had to assume that liability, and then it will immediately impact our rating, or will have to be considered as part of that review. So again, the only I guess additional comment is this will reduce the state's capacity. And the only other, I guess, consideration of, I guess, or for you to consider is, I will ask the BFA if that 250 million is really the amount that is needed to continue the programs. And then the other piece I wanted to mention is there's some guarantee programs that are not being utilized. For example, the Peace Development Authority. I don't have a lot of knowledge of a lot of information to share with you today, but I know they haven't been used. That guarantee hasn't been used. So, perhaps programs like that one can be reviewed in the future, so that if those programs are not being utilized, perhaps the state could consider a review, and then perhaps lapse those authorizations to allow the state to have a little more capacity for its own issuances or for programs like the BFA. So that concludes my remarks. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee? Yes, Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Did I understand you correctly that a credit guarantee has the same effect on our bonding ability as taking out an actual bond?
Because of this formula in our 6C that essentially caps how much the legislature can approve. So we prepare this analysis every year to review that. We determine the 10% of unrestricted revenue every year, and then we project. We take a look at our current debt service and project what has been authorized. So, for example, the state has.
No, that's, I'm just, my question was, this essentially, if we approve the full amount, would crowd out an equivalent amount from borrowing for the capital budget. Is that correct?
That's correct. There is
Okay, thank
capacity. There is capacity. It is part of that calculation. So yes, that's the quick answer. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Ebel.
Thank you, and thank you very much for being here. Just a couple of things, since I was on Public Works for many, many years, and we talked a lot about the capital budget. And how to, we really worked hard to limit how much exposure we had. I know that the statutory restriction is 10%, but my recollection is that we've never been that high, and you work very hard to keep it lower than that. And I would just ask, on average, what is the cap that you've usually seen versus the statutory requirement?
Thank you for the question. That's what we look at the debt affordability study at the same time. So we look at the ratios. We calculate the debt to revenue ratio. We calculate the per capita, and again, happy to share that with you. And so we look at, so right now the ratio, the main ratio, the debt to revenue ratio, is 4.2%. And that's a little above the median according to the rating agencies, but it's a good ratio. That's typically where we want to be. And so that's why what we do with the debt affordability study is we try to stress that. We try to say, well, what happens if interest rates go up? Well, what happens if we issue more debt? So that's what the sensitivity I included this time around, if the state issue more debt, because an additional $40 million was approved for the prison to do that that study. So I'm starting to stress those, those analysis to include more debt and to see what that does. So in general, it works. So in future recommendations, because I know the legislature wants to issue more debt just because costs keep increasing and all of that. So we used to say, well, the state should stay within the 120 million every year. I'm being more generous right now, so my analysis include 130 million for future biennia to see what that does. So then the ratios are again continue to remain manageable even when we stress our debt. But again, if we had to pay additional state guarantees, that's when things could look very different for the state.
Follow up, Representative Eagle.
Thank you. So I just want to clarify again, right now, it's the ratio is 4.2%, right? And even though there's a statutory cap of 10%, we keep it lower than that. And also, I just want to build on Representative McGuire's question. So it's really a one-for-one thing. If you're in deciding whether to increase this cap, you're also in some ways limiting the capability, like under the capital budget of.
That is true. That's the math. Again, I think the state has been mindful of, a little bit of that risk in terms of what those programs. And for a moment, I'm going to wear my, the other hat is supporting the BFA. The state recognizes that those programs, support economic development, so those will always be good for economy for our state. So it's really keeping that balance, and obviously that's for you to consider. I'm just sharing the math and sharing what we look at, and that's what we do. We review that every year. Is really not. It is an ongoing review of where we are, and so it's healthy to talk about it.
Representative Munz.
Thank you very much for coming out on this cold day of mourning for all New England football fans.
Not as convenient as the State House, but yes, no problem.
So if we were to increase this to $450 million, what would that do to the debt ratio? Where would it go? I mean, it's 4.2% now. Where would it end up?
So again, it will impact this formula, the ratio. It doesn't impact the ratio just because it's not true debt. The ratio will only be, we will only adjust the ratio if it's actual debt. So that's the true debt to revenue ratio that we calculate. Like I said, we stress our calculations, and we look at if the state were to pay for all of that, where would that put us? And so then the ratio in those cases obviously increases to like close to 7%, or 8%. But again, assuming that this, the guarantee programs work and the BFA continue to have their own obviously process and controls, the state will never perhaps have to worry about issuing that debt.
Follow up.
So I guess I'm confused. It's still early. I haven't finished my cup of coffee. I thought you mentioned that these loan guarantees or these lines of credit are equivalent to actual debt.
They are when it comes to the formula and the state and the ability to approve additional debt. So, for example, if you're using up all of the state's capacity based on R6C, then the legislature will come to the point where again, discussing capital budgets or discussing an emergency, for example, or a prison. That's when the state will have to worry about, okay, there's not enough capacity to issue more debt because we've reached that cap. That's when it truly will impact the state. The other ones are just assumptions. The current ratio is 4.3%, but that will only change if that's again actual debt. If we issue that amount.
Yes, follow up.
Just one last follow-up. You had mentioned a number of $120 million during your testimony, and I don't recall what that was in
Right. So,
relation to.
so with the capital budget process in the past, we were tried to recommend that the legislature stay and approve about $180 million when it comes to the capital budget. For many years, that was swallowed. Over the last few years, that the legislature has approved additional bond and authorization to fund capital projects. So, for example, the last capital budget was 137 million, or ended up being, because they ended up being 139 million, because there were some projects from previous years that were they had been lapsed and they brought them back. So for the biennium, it was 139 million, even though the typical recommendation would have been 120 million. So that's what I'm talking about 120 million. So now future projections, what I'm doing is I'm projecting a little more, 130 for the biennium, just to see what that does, because that will be actual debt, state debt. I hope that makes sense. I hope that answer your question.
Representative Rung.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. and Thank you for taking my question. So, currently the credit limit's at 200 million, and this bill would raise it to 450 million. Do you feel that more than doubling it in this bill is necessary at this time for the state? And you're probably going to answer with your BFA hat. I don't care. I'm just kind of interested. Is there like a specific project or some kind of reason why this has to be done now to more than double this limit?
I will. Thank you for the question. I will defer that to the executive director of the BFA. Again, I think what I know about the transactions of the BFA is some of them are large transactions that are required. 100 million perhaps is required. So I think I will defer that question to the BFA, just because, and that's my question, right? Is do we really need an additional 250 million, or maybe there's another amount that could be more appropriate? And for that, I will just defer that question to the executive director of the BFA.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony today, and thank you for being here.
Of course, thank you, and my pleasure.
Okay. Next, I'd like to offer Representative Sweeney an opportunity, if he would like, or
If I may, I would
Yeah.
defer to James Key Wallace. He's the executive director of New
Okay.
Hampshire BFA.
we should.
Much smarter than I am.
We will do that. Please come up and introduce yourself. Thank you.
Good morning. For the record, James Key Wallace, Executive Director of the New Hampshire BFA, and for full disclosure, temporarily Interim Commissioner for New Hampshire Business and Economic Affairs for, I think, maybe 2 more weeks. So thank you for having me this morning. I think I heard a few questions from the committee, and one of them was why now and why this amount? So the BFA has noticed a trend over the last 30, 35 years, but especially in the last several, where projects are just more expensive. So, we've never had the state ever had to pay out on one of our guarantees. The projects that we are doing, however, 10 years ago, the same building might have cost 15 million. Now it costs 40. You have inflation. It's been particularly problematic in construction materials and labor for commercial real estate. It hasn't slowed people down. We're still building buildings, which is great, generating revenue for the communities, making jobs. But the amount of the guarantee capacity for our programs gets used up in bigger chunks each time we bring an employer into the state. Even when I started, several years ago, it was a big deal. BAE came into Manchester. It was a $30 million project. As far as the BFA's contribution, they put 100 million in. But we recently brought New Balance into Londonderry. That was a $70 million project, same size building, right? So, more than doubled. So that's part of it. The other reason is we've been recently very much up against our cap for our programs. So we've been constrained. And, if we say, okay, how much runway do we need to make sure we're not, running to the legislature in an emergency saying we've got a qualifying user of the program, but we need X new dollars and we're going to lose it because it's not in the middle of the session. So we like to, when we come and ask for a request for this every couple of years, we say, how much do we need kind of with our pipeline of recruitment targets? And then how much do we want ahead of that so we don't have to just turn around and come right back in an emergency? There is a bill in the Senate to do the same thing, to increase it to 400 million instead of 450 million. We've told the Senate that that's totally fine. That's the range that we think is appropriate for the agency. So I believe you've all received this circulatory of kind of facts about the BFA. I always like to say a couple things. We don't use any taxpayer funds. We're a self-supported agency. We've never had to pay out. The state's never had to pay out on a guarantee. A couple things that are noted. So when we increase the capacity for us to use these programs, as the treasurer stated, that does balance out with how much eventually the state could borrow in a theoretical circumstance. I heard there was still lots of capacity there, which was good to know. But that is the trade-off. We have some interesting requirements that I think are important just to know, the risks of our programs, candidly. We think they're small. By statute, we require collateral when we offer guarantees. The BFA is also required to set aside reserves to pay if the guarantees are exercised. So not only is there an 80% loan to value requirement, so you have some buffer if something goes wrong, we have to also act as a buffer. So if something does go wrong and the property is short, that no one's coming to the state to ask for a check. In almost 35 years, that's worked well. So I'm happy to answer any questions the committee might have, and I very much appreciate your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Yes, Representative Mons.
Thank you, and thank you for coming in. What is your pipeline right now, and looking ahead for the next couple of years?
It's a great question. I wouldn't be able to publicly disclose confidential companies who might be moving from Massachusetts, for example. But it's robust. We are actively talking to several companies that are looking at projects anywhere from $15 to $100 million of new development for the state. And those are big projects. People forget that actually most of our projects are small businesses. 5,000 plus of the 6,000 companies we've worked with borrow an average of $70,000. So we support like Main Street as well.
Follow up?
Yeah, I probably should have prefaced my question with kind of some background. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to understand is if we were to reduce this from an increase of 250 million to 150 million, let's say, would that give you enough capacity, additional capacity, to comfortably handle your pipeline right now for the next, until the next legislative session?
It's a great question. I'll answer it in two ways if I could. It would definitely handle the transactions we know about. It's hard to know if it would be enough because oftentimes, you get the call and a company is interested in New Hampshire and you try to work something out. How big that project is 6 months from now, when it is, you don't know. I think, 150 million increase the contingent credit limit would handle what we know about. It increases the chance that I'll be visiting your friendly committee next time you convene in the session. Would probably be how I'd describe it.
Representative Rung.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So did this bill come to us at the request of the BFA?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And follow-up?
Follow up.
Okay. And I understand, it's, hopefully going to bring in more businesses to New Hampshire. Does the BFA consider when they're approving these guarantees of the other infrastructure needs that business would need? I'm particularly concerned about housing because we have a housing shortage anyway. Would that influence whether BFA would approve a project or not, whether housing would be available to accommodate the employees coming in?
Thank you, Representative. Housing is a major issue. The direct answer to your question is, we approve the business's financing. The decision to come to New Hampshire is ultimately up to the business, and of course, we're working with them. But I will tell you very directly that they absolutely consider the availability of housing in their location decisions. Housing leads to workforce leads to hiring. And so, I'm not saying, I think New Hampshire is a great place to choose and companies are choosing it. So we're doing a lot of things right. But housing's, I would just, I guess I agree with you. We need housing, we need workforce. It's probably the number one or two thing that companies say to me when they're evaluating their location decisions is, can we hire people? The answer's been yes, which is great. We do have to keep up. Yeah, of course.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Thank you.
At this time, are there any additional speakers for this that you know? Okay. Okay. With that, I will close. I wish I had a gavel. I will close the work session on House Bill 1042. And I would like to open the work session on House Bill 241, which is a bill relative to the health insurance coverage of pain management services for the management of chronic pain. And I would like to recognize the bill's prime sponsor, Representative Nagel. Please come up and introduce yourself.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry if this is the wrong time to ask, but I just wondered if the report that the treasurer mentioned to us about the debt capacity, if we could get copies of that. Thank you. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
All set? All set? Yeah, I'm Representative Dave Nagel. I represent Gilmanton, Guilford, and a small part of Laconia. I will not apologize for the front page of your thing. That was total coincidence. And if you look at the date it was published on Pearl Harbor Day, which is also an interesting coincidence. But I'm really honored to be here today to represent this issue. It's been a very important issue for me for the last 40 years. We began this process of trying to figure out how to increase access to non-opioid therapies 35 years ago. This particular bill that we're looking at now, we started the process about 10 years ago. From the very beginning, we've had a great bipartisan, multi-stakeholder support about the concept. The question was never the concept, but how. And this past summer, we put together the original bill, not the amended form, and we were told we were close. So that was exciting. Just as a background for me, I'm specialized in physical medicine and rehabilitation, pain management, and acupuncture, and I've been practicing at Concord Orthopedics for the last 36 years, and prior to that at Easter Seals. I treat patients who deal with challenges with complex disability. Virtually every one of them has some form of pain. My pride in life is that I actually created novel community-based integrative pain programs that we would like to see as the standard going forward. In short, I represent the 66 million Americans who suffer from chronic pain, the 1.5 million in hospice care every year, the 50 million who will have a surgery, and the unknown tens of millions who have moderate to severe pain from an acute injury. And I also represent the 2 million people that suffer from opioid use disorder. 60% of them who had a prior substance use disorder. In other words, I represent you and your families. If you look at the rest of my document, the next section just outlines part of my background. It's relatively short list compared to what I've done. On page 2 and into page 3 is the list of the sponsors of the bill that I advocate for. And on page 3, and if you want, anybody has time and you want to look at all these documents, these are the national organizations that have supported this process for a very long time. Which brings me to the picture that I shared on the front. And if you look at page 2, the first thing that I did, and this, I have to explain why this is germane because it's really important. We just watched a football game, really some of us did yesterday. I know the outcome may not have been pleasant for some of us. About 10 years ago, I received a call from the NFL Players Association, which I thought was a joke, and it turned out not to be, inviting me to come to Washington because they wanted to look at the whole issue of how we take care of pain in professional athletes. Unbeknownst to me, they had read my book, and that's why they asked me to come. I had a clear idea what I wanted to accomplish. I told them what I wanted to accomplish. The next thing I know is they made me chair. So I was actually the lead author for this process. The best part about that is we got to interview professional athletes, football players, who have an incidence of pain of about 100%. The other thing that was unexpected, and I grew up in Orchard Park right by the Bills Stadium. That's why yesterday's game didn't mean a lot to me personally. But I've been around professional football players my whole life. And I've been able to look at what they look like after they're done playing, but we got to interview players after they retired, so we saw the difference. When you're an active player, the sky is the limit. You can get any treatment you want in an integrative fashion. Our only goal was to teach players and their families how to do this in an organized fashion that made sense. And that's what we did, is we created a as far as I know, the only consumer-oriented, evidence-based pain management guide, and we're the only ones that have ever done it for professional athletes. And that was awesome, and it really helped them out. We're actually meeting later today for a regular meeting. However, when we started interviewing retired players, then all of a sudden we saw where the problems fell. They didn't have access to all these therapies whenever they wanted. They basically were on their own again, and predictably what happened was they started doing things that probably weren't really great. Like, for example, alcoholism in retired players is very common. One of the players retired that was at a lot of our meetings, frankly, was stoned at every meeting. And he had started a CBD company. He was unaware that most commercial CBD does have THC in it. And if you take enough of it, you will get stoned. And he was stoned at every meeting. And he was taking humongous doses, but he had post-concussive syndrome from playing an offensive line position for a long time. And all of a sudden, these people don't have access to stuff, and you start to see their lives fall apart. And so what I was excited to be part about with Exos, which is a wellness group that also trains professional athletes, is they actually created a wellness program to save these people and give them a quality of life going forward, which is exactly what we're trying to do with this bill, not just for professional athletes, but for people around this table. I mean, is there anybody here that's never experienced pain before? I mean, if you have, I'd like to talk to you because we got to check your nervous system out. Anyways, so the question really all along has never been about if, it's about how we do this. So this past summer, you have an original bill in front of you that had a very large fiscal note, which kind of blew my mind because I didn't really understand it. But we convened this past summer with key stakeholders, including the U.S. Pain Foundation, representatives of the insurance department and insurance companies, and trying to figure out how we could make this bill workable without a huge fiscal note. I was not aware that if I put a mandate on a bill, that creates a cost for the state. So it was a learning experience. So what we did was we looked at, well, how Massachusetts, Maine, and Illinois had done this, and the U.S. Pain Foundation was involved in the entire process. We all agreed that we had three options on how to go forward. One of them was to stick where we were and go down in flames. The second one was to create a pilot program, which I actually already did. And we're in the process of looking at that. But the VA actually has already done this. So it was kind of unnecessary. And then the third option was the bill that's in front of you that we all agreed to. It passed our subcommittee unanimously. It passed the subcommittee of commerce unanimously. It passed the commerce committee unanimously in the House on consent. So we're pretty excited where we are right now. I think that's pretty much most of what I wanted to say. I did want to say one other thing, actually, that you really need to know. This is also in your packet. It's the reason why this is important is that this came out actually before OxyContin was a thing, and unfortunately, somebody put their address label over the date, so I don't remember the exact date. I've been using this in lectures. Yep. So that was really, I mean, OxyContin came out in 1996. Duragisa came out subsequent to that. This came out before that. And it's been entertaining to watch people blame, big pharma for the opioid crisis. And yeah, were they part of it? Sure, of course they were. But there was a lot of other issues involved. And one of the big issues was a failure to provide access to these other therapies. And that is what the bill does. You can look through the rest of this at your leisure if you wish. I'm happy to discuss anything that's in here. I did also want to point out on page 4, the Veterans Administration pilot program, when they did what we basically did. I'm sorry, it says HB 303. That was HB 241's predecessor. But there was a 38% reduction, opioid use, 30% reduction in spine procedures, less anxiety, depression, less use of medication, and improved quality of life, which is exactly what Exos did with NFL players in their retirement years. And that's really basically about it. If you want to talk about the specifics of the bill, how we came to where we're at right now, I'm happy to do that also.
Well, thank you for the testimony. I'd like to point out to the committee that the bill that was presented does not, in fact, have any cost in the fiscal. So this is more, it's been pointed out to me that this is more of a policy bill as opposed to a fiscal bill. So, yeah, I think you're going to be okay, in that regard. Are there any questions? Yes, Representative Munns.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. If I read this bill correctly, I mean, really all it's doing is providing information to individuals. It's not mandating any specific kind of coverage, correct?
Yep. So that is an incredibly important observation. Where I'm an idealist, which you may have noticed by now. Where this bill is, and as opposed to where it needs to be, is there's a huge gap. The original bill is exactly where I would like to be. With that said, the last 10 years have been really fun because I've gotten to work with the insurers on a regular basis, and more recently, my friends in the insurance department. It's been a great learning experience. But they've also learned from me. I've challenged them over and over and over and over again. We have problems with both pills and procedures. They pay for things that really don't work. And we strongly believe that if you adopt these methods, which the VA has seen, is that you will actually cut your costs. So that gives them an incentive to do that without legislation. And this is basically a start. It's certainly not a finish. I mean, from the beginning, the whole goal was decreasing cost and improving outcomes. That's what the whole goal was. I'm really not interested in increasing cost.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any other people that will be speaking on this bill today? Be happy to have you. Please come up and introduce yourself.
Representative Nagel, do you have an extra copy of this so I can put it in the file? Sure. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Michelle Heaton. I'm Director of Life and Health at the New Hampshire Insurance Department. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'll just give you a little bit of a background about the fiscal perspective and our work with Representative Nagel. The bill in one of its original iterations mandated services or coverage benefits. In our state, we have under the ACA our essential health benefits in our benchmark plan. And those benefits in that benchmark plan that was adopted back in 2013 for plan year 2024, if we add any more benefits to that, then the state is required to defray the cost of it, meaning that the cost of that additional benefit, the state has to pay the health insurers to provide that coverage. And so we're always trying to be mindful of that and making sure that if we're going to be adding benefits, everyone's aware of what the costs are going to be. And it's not necessarily that you're providing new benefits, but in addition to what's in the benchmark plan. And so it's a complicated analysis, and how that is interpreted can change with different administrations at the federal level. But right now, even if you were to add something that's already part of the benchmark plan, there is a potential that the state would have to defray the cost. And so we worked with Representative Nagel to amend his bill in a way that would have less of a fiscal impact. And I think what we're trying to do here is with this plan, it's providing people a roadmap of how to get care for these different types of conditions and how do they access the benefits they already have under their plan. And so that's where the changes really come in. There are some other requirements with respect to prior authorization and step therapy, just to make sure that there are no restrictions that are more stringent for non-opioid treatments than they are for opioid treatments, to try to encourage, bring down barriers to help people get more access to those non-opioid treatments. But a lot of the different types of benefits discussed in this bill are already covered under insurance plans. And so the shift of this bill is really to focus on how to make sure that people know what their benefits are and how to access those benefits. And if they get the benefits through this this program, then there will be less restrictions on prior auth. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but hopefully that gives you a little bit more context.
Thank you. Representative McGuire, then Representative Munns.
Thank you. Appreciate the information. I'm trying to figure out what the bill actually requires, so that, for example, I have a frozen shoulder. If my doctor happens to be a surgeon, he'll probably recommend a shoulder replacement. Some other doctor hopefully would recommend physical therapy or cortisone shots or something like that. So is it more a matter of getting the doctors to be aware of the options than telling the insurance companies what to cover?
It's a little bit more complicated than that, but yes, I mean, a part of what managed care is, and that's the type of health insurance we have in our state, your HMOs. Anyone with commercial coverage, you're in a managed care plan where you have to go to your PCP. Your PCP is going to make recommendations. Things like prior auth are put into place to make sure that people are accessing the most cost-effective and evidence-based treatments that are going to help with their actual condition. And so all of that together is supposed to help patients access the care that's most appropriate for them. I think with respect to pain management, and a lot of what Representative Nagel has been trying to address is, rather than providers or even patients wanting to take the opioids as kind of a quick fix, this plan is to hopefully help them steer towards treatments that are covered under their plan that are actually going to get to the root cause of what their issues are and can provide, a better quality of life down the line. But all of that ties into clinical guidelines, which are required to be evidence-based when they can be. And that's part of what the health plan helps administer.
Thank you.
Representative Munns, did you go off? Okay. Any additional questions? Representative Ebel.
I just, thank you very much. I want to be clear, is the insurance department supporting this bill, or are you taking no position?
We take no position. We did assist Representative Nagel in helping convene the stakeholders to try to find some agreement on something that everyone can live with, and we helped with the drafting of the bill to make sure that it checks all the boxes in the way that he wanted it to.
Follow up?
This is a very boring question, but I'm the clerk. Could you give me your name again, please?
Michelle Heaton,
Okay,
and I'm the Director of Life and Health at the Insurance Department.
okay.
Yes, and Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being with us. So obviously reading the fiscal note and hearing your testimony, are we confident that non-opioid pain management services would be more expensive than opioid pain services, or is there a possibility that there's cost savings to the consumer?
There could be cost savings. It's very difficult to project out what this will actually do, and that's why in our fiscal note we said indeterminable. Ideally, if you are able to steer people towards more conservative treatments, and those treatments are successful, and they don't need, opioids long term, or they don't need surgery or some of those more expensive things, then yeah, there will be a health savings or a cost savings there. But it really depends on the patient, what their conditions are, and so a lot of those things is very hard to predict out long term.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, Representative Rung.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. I'm a little confused. So if this bill were to pass, would healthcare providers be in a more of a position to recommend non-opioid treatments even if they don't cover them? And I'll use my experience. Several years ago, I had shingles really bad, and I developed a post-herpetic syndrome, I think it was called, but it was very, very painful, and the opioids didn't touch the pain. But I went on my own, and I discovered that acupuncture had success, and it did. It gave me hours of relief, but that wasn't covered, and my doctor didn't mention it to me. I kind of did it on my own. So would this bill would that have encouraged my doctor to say, hey, your plan doesn't cover acupuncture, but it could be a help to you while you're having this?
Not necessarily. What this bill is going to do is it's going to have the health carriers come up with, there's not a good term for it because I don't want to say plan because there's a health plan, but a program, I guess, of what options of covered benefits do they have available? And there has to be a certain amount of covered benefits. Not all plans cover acupuncture, but some do. They could have coverage for dry needling that is provided by other types of healthcare providers. So what the carrier's supposed to be doing is looking at what covered services do they have available and putting them into this program so that the providers know for this person what are the options available, what are the things that we could suggest that are not opioids, that are not surgery, that are some of these other types of benefits to help manage their pain better.
Okay, follow up.
Follow up.
So they in the plan that those insurance providers would offer their patients would only include what is covered under the. If we were to have ensure that, let's say, acupuncture was covered by all, that's where that cost would come in, right? Because the state would have to pick up the cost to the insurers of adding in that coverage.
Yeah,
I
that's the original versions mandated that certain services be covered. And when you do that mandate, now the state, if it's not part of the benchmark plan and it's in addition to, the state would need to cover the cost of those services for people in the ACA plan on the market.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Mons? Waving off, okay. I don't typically take questions from the audience, I'm sorry. Representative Sweeney, would you like the question answered?
Sure.
Okay, please come to, thank you for your testimony. Please come to the microphone and answer the representative's question. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. The VA data actually did answer that question, but I do want to give a case report, which is always dangerous to generalize, but it's true. I'm an acupuncturist, and I'm also an interventional pain specialist. When I'm an interventional pain specialist, I'm very expensive. When I'm an acupuncturist, I'm relatively cheap. I have one patient I followed for 30 years with acupuncture, have never done anything invasive with her other than that, and the entire cost over 30 years was less than a 3-injection treatment over 2 months. She was also recommended to have surgery, which would be dramatically more expensive. So it's our belief that we do save, and the VA actually did show that you do save money doing this. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no further testimony to be had, I will close the work You may ask a question before I close this.
This is, sorry, I want to ask a question of the LBA. So the draft of the bill that I have, I'm kind of confused because the fiscal note, it says as introduced and it's dated 12, is there another?
Yeah.
Okay, I
On
must
your,
not.
on your table, there's a revised
In my
fiscal
mess,
note.
okay.
Yeah,
I
I
was
have
sure there
another
must be
copy
somewhere.
if you would like one.
Okay. I wouldn't mind it, Melissa, so I could get it in the file. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You are welcome. So with that, I will close the work session on House Bill 241, and I will open up a work session on House Bill 629 FN, which is a bill that, an act that will be raising the cost of a boat decal fee and allocating the funds collected by such fees to the dam maintenance fund. And I know that the prime sponsor is our representative, Peter Leishman, but he is not here. Is there anybody that would like to introduce this? Okay, well, I'm going to have Representative Ebel come up to introduce it, and then, well, I'll take other testimony. Thank you.
There should be a file there for 629 in the stack.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Karen Ebel, and I represent Merrimack District 7, which is New London and Newbury. And I'm here to introduce/discuss HB 629 for Representative Leishman, who was unable to be here today. The issue, well, so the other thing I just wanted to note is I asked Melissa to prepare for you the report that was issued by a study committee when they analyzed the situation with dams. And it was based on that report that a bill was issued to try to do better with dam funding. One of the things I want to mention in particular is that New Hampshire is unusual in that it owns many, many dams. And so when you own a dam, you're responsible for its upkeep, and they cost an extreme amount of money to keep them up. You can see estimates. I thought I saw somewhere, I don't want to misquote, something like $44 million. A lot of them on average to maintain them properly. The average age for a state-owned dam in New Hampshire exceeds 100 years old. So it's a very expensive proposition. I don't quite understand how we found ourselves in this position, but there you have it. So the idea is that the original study committee recommended that more money be raised in some way. They had one concept that had to do with fees based on shoreline that folks owned. That apparently was voted down, but what they have proposed that came through resources was raising the cost of the boat decal fee by $5 for registration and allocating the funds to the dam maintenance fund. If you look at the fiscal note, you can see how much they hope to raise. Actually, the one that I've got, again, I have an old one, says 8 million. That's not right. It's like $600,000 to $800,000. I think they might like to see go into the maintenance fund. It's definitely not enough, but anything is to the good. And I would just add from my time on the Public Works Capital Budget Committee, every year there's quite a healthy request to try to raise more money to keep the dams maintained. And I think it's pretty obvious what happens if they are not properly maintained.
Thank you. Quick question. Do you know what the current fee is for the decals? So I wanted to see what percentage increase that would be.
Yes, I'm sorry, I don't know.
You don't
I'm
know.
sure Representative Leishman would know.
Okay. Okay. Representative McGuire.
Yes, thank you. Looking at the fiscal note, which is based on both changes, not just the
Yeah.
decal fee, it appears to me that, well, it says that the $5 increase would generate 530,000.
Right.
And it appears to me that the
Okay.
three people to manage the program is overwhelmingly for the shoreline fee. So would it be reasonable to say that there would be no significant impact if they just
well,
increase the fee and
The
bundle?
LBA just handed me, does everyone have this amended fiscal? There's an amended fiscal note, Representative.
I didn't get that.
That's, well, I don't have it either, so
Ah,
I
well,
appreciate the,
In that case,
the
could I just
question.
ask the LBA if that's the case, that the three people go away?
That is correct. The only impact is just that increase of the $5 in the revenue. That's it. There's no other impact to expenditures.
Thank you very
Yep,
much.
and we will get you copies. Jack's working on getting you copies of that fiscal note for the amended bill. Thank you.
yeah, and I'll find out what the current fee is. I should know, I have a boat, but
Yeah, because people are going to want to know what the percentage increase. Are we doubling it, or is it a fraction of what the decal is?
I'm trying to remember the fee increases that were included in the budget, and it might be that there was also a increase in there.
That was my recollection, is that
Yeah, so
we
I
had already
thought-
increased it for other
Right.
reason, for revenue, and now we're going to add another. So Representative Sweeney, did you have a question?
Do, but the green badge, sorry, I don't know your name, might have a better answer for it, but do all boats in New Hampshire pay this fee? Is it just freshwater lakes that pay it? Do fishing boats off the coast pay it? Or,
Representative Sweeney, I think Department of Safety is here and they actually do the boat fee, so they could speak to the current cost of the fee and then that answer for
okay,
you.
great, thank you.
Then I will stand down.
Okay, thank you for your testimony.
Okay.
And then for introducing the bill. Whoever would like to come up next and introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Jen Bailey, Assistant Director of the DMV.
I'm Jennifer O'Leary, Registration Bureau Administrator at the DMV.
So right now there's multiple decal fees because we have the two decals that were implemented last year. So one of those fees is the $5 fee. But then in addition to that, the other decal you get has a public access fee of $5, a search and rescue fee of $1, a milfoil fee of $4.50, and a lake fund fee of $5. So I believe that's going to total about $21.50 for what you currently pay between all the decals right now.
That's before adding the $5?
Correct.
Okay, so approximately 25% increase, 27% increase
Yep.
with the decal. Okay. Any questions for Representative Sweeney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So alluding to my previous question, if you're a fisherman and you have a boat in Hampton or Seabrook, do you pay that lake management fee? Would you pay this decal fee for the dams?
Yep. The only difference is the ocean only is $2 additional, right? Yeah. The only difference is if your boat is only ocean based, then it's going to be an additional $2 fee. Other than that, yes, all boats pay those fees in addition to their registration fees of how old your vehicle is, how many feet it is. So yes, all boats pay that. And I think it was mentioned, on average, we do about 105,000 boats a year.
And that's even whether they're motorized or not, even a rowboat has to have a decal?
A rowboat or canoe only gets registered if it has a motor on it.
Okay,
So
that's
it's all
so
motorized.
basically motorized boats now. Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. I'll invite the next speaker, please. Introduce yourself.
Good morning. For the record, Corey Clark, Chief Engineer at the Dam Bureau, New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. The department does not take a position on the bill, but I wanted to answer some of the historical questions that may have come up as far as dam funding in New Hampshire. So, starting in the early 1900s, a lot of the dams that the state of New Hampshire now owns were not owned by the state at that time. However, a lot of those dams were at that point in time owned by power companies or downstream mill users. And throughout the decades in the mid 1900s, a lot of those power companies no longer needed those assets. However, the state certainly saw a large recreational benefit and economic benefit for maintaining those assets, which more often than not create a lot of the lakes throughout New Hampshire. Just for example, state of New Hampshire owns the dams on the outlet of Sunapee, Winnisquam, Winnipesaukee, Squam, Newfound, Ossipee, and many others. And so the state took over ownership in the 1960s and found that with this large inventory of dams, there needed to be a mechanism for actually funding all of these dams and operation, maintenance, and reconstruction. And so in the 1980s, there was a large push at that time for hydropower development all throughout the country. And New Hampshire certainly saw that same push. And so at that time, the Dam Maintenance Fund was created and funded in part by the leasing of state-owned dams for hydropower purposes. And so a lot of hydropower was developed at that time. I previously mentioned Lake Winnipesaukee and Winnisquam. Both of those sites have small hydropower plants at the outlets of those lakes. Squam did, and however, that site has not been economic for quite some time. So the revenue generated from the leasing of those sites and run by private entities basically funded the Dam Maintenance Fund. At that time, there was a lot of those hydropower entities were able to get into power purchase agreements, knowing what the return on revenue was going to be for the next several decades. In the early 2000s, a lot of those power purchase agreements were canceled, and so a lot of those hydropower entities found themselves having to basically get the return on the open market. And because of that, and we've already heard today about increasing capital costs and the such, New Hampshire has gone from, in mid 2000s, we leased 12 hydropower sites. Now we are down to 8 and likely going to be seeing more reduction as capital costs increase. And basically the return on investment for these hydros just aren't quite there for these private entities. And so the study committee that we've heard about in 2024 convened and looked at different revenue sources for helping the Dam Maintenance Fund. Over the years, as the hydro revenue has decreased, we've certainly become more and more reliant on funding our operations through general fund and funding our reconstruction through capital funds. And so this is one of the recommendations that came out of the study committee was to look at this boat registration fee along with the shoreline fee, which was taken out of this bill. There is a current bill that addresses some of the issues that were in this original bill, working its way through the State House right now, HB 1655, that looks at, instead of a per foot shoreline fee, it actually looks at a per property fee. And so right now we're looking at, the state of New Hampshire owns roughly 275 dams. We, in 2023, did an analysis of what it would take to renovate all those dams and get them onto, say, a 50-year cycle. We heard earlier that a lot of these dams are over 100 years old. And so to basically renovate each one of those dams over the next 50 years, we'd be looking at roughly about $414 million in need. The state of New Hampshire is unique that we own the majority or a lot of the high hazard dams in the state. We don't own the majority necessarily, but we own a large percentage of that for one owner at 64 high hazard dams. So those are dams, if they were to fail, there would be probable loss of life. Those dams have to meet much higher criteria, and so just the cost out of that 414 million to renovate those 64 high hazard dams is roughly about $300 million. And so we operate right now generally on about 7.5 million annually. Like I said earlier, that's a mix of general fund, hydropower revenue, a couple other different ways that we fund ourselves. But in order to bring all these dams up to current standards, so that we're renovating one every 50, or each dam gets a renovation about every 50 years, we'd be looking at having to increase our operating expense to about 16 million annually. So, and so that's what the study committee looked at, and this bill came out of that study committee. So I'm certainly here to answer any questions.
Yeah, so because it is a relatively small amount compared to what would be needed, the 600 or 800K, how would you prioritize the use of that? Because I mean, you could wipe it all out in just one fell swoop on one of the hazardous dams, or would you more likely use it for some of the smaller dams to maintain people's water property?
Likely what we would do is we'd probably take a look at our general fund expenses. And right now, for example, we have three dam operators that work out of Concord. Some of you may know the new facility that we were fortunate to get constructed several years ago off of I-89 that has the murals on the doors as you go by. So we have 3 full-time dam operators that work out of that facility that do everything from mowing and brush cutting to raising and lowering water levels to flood response. Those 3 individuals are funded, their salary and benefits come out of the general fund. And so what we would probably try to do is actually help offset some of our general fund expenses. Now, we would certainly still have to look at how are we going to get our large capital projects done, and likely still be looking at capital funds to do that. But this funding would probably help offset some of our general fund expenses.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, Representative Evil.
Thank you. Are there federal matching funds, or are there some sort of federal funds that can help with the dam maintenance?
So historically, no, there has not been. However, through FEMA did actually create a grant program I think it was federal fiscal year 2019, so about 2018. They created a program in which high hazard dams in poor condition were eligible for federal funds. It's called the HHPD, or High Hazard Potential Dam Grant System. And since that grant became available, New Hampshire, we have tapped into that federal money. We've used it for design purposes primarily. And I don't know off the top of my head what the total federal monies available. However, New Hampshire has been on average probably getting somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million every year to help towards this. And in fact, we are now working towards creating the necessary MOUs through Governor and Executive Council to receive some federal money for design of Newfound Lake Dam and Pittsfield Mill Dam as well. So, and those are, I think, about $520,000 each. So, like I said, the state, we've been able to get about $1 million every year to help with that, and we've been using it for design purposes. However, we also that money is also available for private dams as well, and so I know Lake Waukee up in Meredith has also actually gotten a very large percentage, I think on the order of almost $6 million out of the federal grant to do rehabilitation of that dam. So there are some opportunities out there, but once again, if you look at the total need, it does not quite gonna reach the goals that we need. And so that's the only one that has really come about in recent memory from the federal side. There was a state-owned dam that failed in 2017. Were you able to use FEMA restoration funds or disaster declaration funds to help rebuild that dam up in Warren. That dam has actually since been transferred to the town of Warren after the state rebuilt it. So we're always looking for different opportunities out there. But generally there's few and far between.
I have a question, then I'll go to you, Representative. Has the department identified some dams that may just be able to be totally removed to restore what the original natural flow was? And I know that also will cost money, but is that part of your program to remove dams that maybe are no longer necessary?
Certainly, yes. Just a quick example of that. State of New Hampshire owns 3 high hazard dams on the Piscataquag River in Goffstown and the Manchester. At one point in time, all 3 dams created hydropower and were all leased for hydropower. Now we are down to only 1 dam that is currently generating hydropower that is being leased. And so out of those 3 dams, we're actually looking to remove one of those dams, Hadley Falls Dam in downtown Goffstown. One thing on removals is when you do go down the removal path, generally there's more funding opportunities for removal projects because of the restoration nature of those projects in fish passage and aquatic organism passage, things of that nature. Historically, there have been more federal money available for that. I'm still waiting to hear back on a grant that I applied for last February. So not sure where that's going to be in the future, but that Hadley Falls project, we were actually able to tap into and apply for aquatic resource mitigation funds through the ARM program at DES, and we're able to actually get $4.5 million, although it's still working its way through Governor and Executive Council approval. But that is another source when you do look at removals in which there might be additional funding available. And you are correct, there's a capital expense even when you go down the removal process, but down the road, you don't have the operation and maintenance expenses associated with it.
Thank you. Representative Rung.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So the dam maintenance fund, I'm assuming that's non-lapsing within DES. What's the current balance of that?
I believe the current balance, it is somewhere between $1 million and $2 million, I believe right now. And so generally the way we use the dam maintenance fund now is that fund is primarily used for the salary and benefits and equipment and rentals and that sort of thing for our dam reconstruction projects. And so what we generally do is, so we have a 9-member in-house dam construction crew, which is very unique to New Hampshire. I don't know of another state that has actual their own in-house basically dam construction experts, which not only helps on the construction side, but any emergency response, that becomes a real benefit. So the dam maintenance fund funds those individuals primarily. However, because we seek capital funding, we're able to use some of those capital funding to basically transfer their personnel time to capital expenses when they're working on capital projects. So we try to get creative with what we can, but certainly that fund is there. We get about $500,000 annually of hydro revenue to help support that fund. There's a couple other things. Right now, we're working with one of the hydropower entities to hopefully sell one of our hydro dams that they lease. That would help support the dam maintenance fund. And so, once again, just trying to get creative with how we're funding it.
Follow up?
Follow-up?
Mr. Chair, thank you. So when you apply and receive any federal funding, does that go into that fund too?
Generally, the federal funding stays in its own accounting unit. And so we don't actually transfer it directly into the dam maintenance fund. And so what we will do is because that federal funding has been used primarily for high hazard dams, there's a lot of challenges when you try to address a 150-year-old dam to today's criteria. And so a lot of times we're hiring outside consultants to help us on those projects. So primarily we'll set it up such that the invoices from those consultants are paid directly by the federal funds. It just, for accounting purposes, is much easier than moving it into the dam maintenance fund and then trying to transfer it out.
Got it. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Representative Ebel.
Thank you. how many, let's say, high hazard dams at this point do you consider in poor condition?
Right now, I believe we have 33 in poor condition. So 33 out of the 64, and primarily the reason that most of those dams are what we call in poor condition is they don't meet one of the very specific design criteria for high hazard dams. Here in the state of New Hampshire, we have to, dams that were built prior to 1981 have to adhere to the 1,000-year storm event. So if we have a 1,000-year storm, which is an order of magnitude something of what happened during Hurricane Helene in North Carolina or what happened down in Texas this past summer, those high hazard dams have to be able to pass the resulting flow of a 1,000-year storm event with 1 foot of freeboard. And more often than not, at least for those 33 dams, if you apply that criteria to those dams, they generally won't meet, they won't have the ability to discharge. They will likely overtop. And the assumption is once a dam starts to overtop, then failure is imminent at that point in time. And so that's the challenge. And that's, what also drives that cost is trying to bring those poor dams in poor condition into current criteria.
Any, yes,
One more.
follow up?
So if there's a dam failure like the one in 2017, what was do you have any idea what the cost of that ultimately was? And was it FEMA that ended up, because if they failed, the issue is dramatic.
Yeah, so the 2017 dam that failed, that was a fish and game dam. At the time, it was what we call a low hazard dam, essentially. So we have 4 hazard classifications. We have high hazard, dam fails, probable loss of life. We have significant hazard, dam fails. Likely there won't be any loss of life, but there'll be large economic damages. Possibly a state route is completely severed. Buildings are impacted. And then we have low hazard dams, which are, if those dams were to fail, there might be a loss of a town road, minor economic damage of the sort. That fish and game dam up in Warren was actually tied into a town road. And so when that dam failed, the town road also failed as well. And so there was, I think, about maybe a half a dozen homes that were unable to get access on this dead end road. And so the town actually stepped in without reconstructing the dam, put in a culvert or a stream crossing so that those homes could then have access. And then we worked with the abutters for easements and the such that we could reconstruct the dam because it was the town of Warren really wanted to see that basically that infrastructure be rebuilt. And so that was about just for construction purposes and design purposes, was about $1 million for that dam. Now, once again, that's not having to meet that same criteria as a high hazard dam. So, for example, that dam was $1 million dam. Right now, we're working on Milton Three Ponds, a redesign of that structure over there on the Salmon Falls River. During the conceptual analysis, when we were looking at different designs, the cost for rehabilitating that dam was about $10 million. Now, as we're moving into further design, we're actually looking at about a $20 million cost for that structure. But it's because the design criteria drives having that dam has to be able to pass that much more water.
Representative Mons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Do you have any idea of how many people live downstream from those 33 dams that are in poor condition?
I don't know off the top of my head. Some dams, there may only be 1 or 2 affected residents, and other sites there may be hundreds of residents. One dam that actually is not in poor condition, but we are working on it, and down the road will be a very significant capital cost, is Murphy Dam up in Pittsburgh. It's the state owns that dam. It's the it's the tallest dam that the state owns at over 100 feet tall. And if that dam was to fail, it's not just 1 or 2 individuals. We're talking communities all the way from Pittsburgh down to Dalton, basically to Moore Reservoir. So all those communities, Lancaster, Colebrook, Stewartstown, Canaan, Vermont, they would all be greatly impacted at a failure of that site. So I don't have the numbers as to what it is, but all these a high hazard dam is whether there's 1 residential structure or business impacted upwards to thousands.
Any final questions? Thank you for your testimony. Greatly
You're welcome.
appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, so with that, I will close the work session on House Bill 629, and we'll open up a work session on House Bill 1411. And I don't see Representative Simpson here, who's the main sponsor. Is there anybody that would like to speak to it? Representative Ebel, you're welcome to speak to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Karen Ebel. I represent Merrimack District 7, the towns of New London and Newbury, and Leader Simpson apologizes that she was not able to be here today. I was not able to be at the original hearing, but I did watch it, and I believe there was quite a bit of discussion at that time about this bill. I think what we have to recognize is that the bill, HB 14 and 11, is in response to some of the actions that the federal government has taken to restrict funding coming into the state. What happens when that occurs? What a difficult situation it places the state in, and also trying to seek various remedies if something like that happens. So it's an attempt to explore, I guess, if you would, a way of responding to a situation that puts us into a fiscal constraint. So that's basically what it is. As you know from the hearing, what it would do is authorize the state treasurer to withhold certain payments owed by the state to the federal government when the state has been deprived of federal aid as a result of presidential executive order. So.
Okay, and I appreciate you sitting up there. I know you're on the hot seat here for somebody else because it's a pretty controversial bill. But I will start with Representative Griffin, please.
The clerk.
Clerk.
Thank you for taking my question. This is a bill that really should just go away. It's likely that this would end up with our state treasurer in handcuffs and being hauled off to jail because it's illegal for anybody. It's a criminal act for anyone to withhold money that's been withheld from employees for Medicare, FICA, withholdings. It's a criminal offense. And what this bill is doing is asking us, our state treasurer, to create a criminal offense. And the best thing that could happen to this bill is that the sponsors withdraw it and try another angle.
I appreciate the question. I think there are various categories of state monies that are collected in addition to withholding taxes. So obviously, a violation of federal law is not something that we would seek. I guess one could also query whether it's legal to withhold federal funding that's been authorized by Congress. But I guess one way of looking at this is perhaps we could explore other alternatives. I think part of the problem, and without being partisan about it at all, is that when the federal government takes certain actions, like we've been experiencing lately, it does put the state in a very challenging situation. And, you know, it might be worthwhile, if not to pass it, which I can see that's not your inclination, maybe we could interim study it and think a little bit more about different alternatives and use it as a thought, as a way of approaching how we respond to situations like this.
Maybe we could just hold our breath.
I actually don't know what our alternatives are. I mean, we recently have seen what's going on with the inspections situation, and that I think is flouting, or whatever word you want to use for it. I mean, in the case of inspections, we obviously are taking a tack where we're not concerning ourselves with a violation of the Clean Air Act. So it wouldn't be the first time, I guess, that we take a step like that. Whatever. It's just an
Representative
observation.
McGuire.
Yes, thank you. As a practical matter, I believe Representative Griffin has pointed out why we're not going to take the tax withholding, or
Right.
FICA, that we take from our
Right.
employees'
Right.
paychecks. And my question is there any other money that we normally send to the federal government?
Well, and that's honestly, that would be from a study standpoint, that would be my question, just to understand what else there is there. I frankly don't know.
Representative Weiler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Abelby. Do you or any of the sponsors recall any of the particular situations where they felt that the federal money should have come and it didn't? Can't remember too many.
A lot happened in the last year. The one that I remember was DES, and I wish I could. Wasn't there like some Medicaid funding or home? I mean, I don't know. I remember there have been several situations where the governor has been called upon to call the White House to get certain funding released. I mean, we could look into it. And then, sometimes when calls are made, even though the money was held, then it comes, I'm not sure, but there definitely have been situations where money has been held. And of course, it gets into a whole discussion of if Congress authorizes certain monies to be disseminated, what authority is there within the executive branch not to do that? I mean, I don't know all that nuance.
The biggest fuss I recall is the DEI not going to University of New Hampshire, or money not going to University of Hampshire because they had a DEI program, which the feds didn't want to fund. That's the only one I remember that might have triggered this. I don't recall
There was one with DES, and I know that created quite consternation there, because, they're largely federal funded. A lot of their programs are. So, I mean, it does sort of put your stomach in knots a little bit when you can't rely on it. So I would say this was an attempt to understand better what the state is allowed to do in circumstances where something like this happens. And I'd like to think this is not a partisan issue. I'd like to think that maybe we could just explore what can happen if something like this happens, what our options are, because I'm not sure we actually know. I mean, except like, as you point out with the withholdings.
Before I go to you, Representative, I think it would be helpful if you can convey to Representative Simpson, if she could outline exactly what were the situations under which had money withheld, what was the situation, how much money, and for how long, where ultimately were the funds reinstated. I think if she could outline those things, then we could better assess what actions we might take. In other words, we don't want to either overdo it or, so we need to know proportionally, if we are going to do anything, what was the effect that the federal government had on us before we go trying to give any retribution to them.
I'd be happy to convey that message. We'll
Yeah.
see. I mean, obviously, it was prompted by several things. The other thing I would just say again is this is something perhaps we could study because there might be too much to try to do one way or the other. I personally would like to know what our options are if a federal government does something like this.
Sure. Representative Rung.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. I like the suggestion about interim study. Do you think that could also encompass any municipal impacts? For instance, my community of Merrimack, we're going to be facing a lot of additional costs should ICE go forward with this detention center. It's really unclear about any money that they would reimburse us for, but they're not going to be paying property tax, and that's well over $500,000 a year. That will then have to be put on our other taxpayers in town. So I'm wondering, could interim study look at it from a municipal as well as a state point of view?
I mean, we could probably amend this or, you know, whatever we might like to do with it, but it just seems like that would be another thing that could be studied. I mean, there is this whole issue that the federal government, you know, there's a preemption issue. If the federal government wants to come, we don't exactly have a lot of say over it. So it could be it would be an interesting thing to sort of understand the ramifications of that.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you very much for
Thank
introducing
you.
that. I appreciate it. Okay, so with that, I'm going to close the work session on House Bill 1411. So that wraps it up for today for this work session. I will say that Division 1, our future plan is we're going to wait to see if we get additional bills out of this Thursday session. We will take any additional bills to our next meeting in addition to these 4 bills, and we will do an executive session to take care of all of the bills that we just covered today and any bills that come out of the session, because I want to stay up to date with we got a lot of work coming our way. So, yes, Representative Munns.
Could I ask a question on HB? Any question for members of the committee on HB 1042?
Yes, I'll allow it. Go
Okay.
ahead.
I recognize and agree that we need to have in our toolkit the resources to attract businesses, and that's a good low cost, low risk policy tool. So I support that, and you know, if we are approaching the limit of what we can do, then I think it makes sense to increase that. I wanted to see if there's any, but I also believe, and you heard me talk about it last Thursday, I also believe that it's important that we make sure that we've got the kind of housing that workers of these businesses can afford. And I wanted to get a sense from folks on this committee whether there would be any interest or appetite in perhaps cutting the amount in 1042 back a little bit. Well, a little bit. I mean, it's a lot of money. Cutting it to let me just throw out a number. Cutting it from cutting the increase from 250 million to 150 million, and then using that 100 million to fund some kind of a housing construction loan guarantee program. Is there any interest at all in even considering something like that?
Representative McGuire.
Well, considering the fact that we cut the loan guarantees for housing and killed the bill, I don't think we can put something similar. You'd have to come up with a completely different program that wasn't basically similar to the loan guarantee program that was killed, in order for us to responsibly recommend it to the House.
Let Representative Weiler make a comment, then I'll go to you.
Well, what you proposed would bring an appropriation. There was no appropriation in the bill that could be moved elsewhere, in my mind.
Yes, go ahead, Representative Munns.
I'm not sure. It wouldn't be an appropriation. I mean, the amount, you know, the $100 million loan guarantee that I'm talking about would be essentially the same thing as we're proposing on the business side. And I understand what you're saying, Representative McGuire. My hope was that, you know, by including something that is a third the size, that might make it something that would be palatable.
My opinion is it should be separate. Representative Sweeney, do we not have anywhere from a half a dozen or more bills that are addressing housing? So, you know, as a separate issue?
There are housing bills that an amendment to a housing bill might make sense for that, but I think keeping the 1042 just focused on the BFA's credit limit makes sense to me.
That would be my preference. Representative McGuire?
Yes, and on a side note, if the Senate is recommending 400 million and we're a little concerned that 450 might be too much, it would make sense to amend this to 400 million instead of 450. And I think, yes.
Yes.
So I just wanted to say that the Senate recommended 500 million, and that was in Senate Bill 525.
Because he said 400,
Yeah,
so
it's
he's
actually
wrong.
500. Yeah.
Well,
We were misinformed. We'll have to think about that.
we'll let
Thank
them
you very
we'll let them
much.
adjust it. They always spend more money than we do, so. Okay, any further comment before we close out the session? Okay. All right, well, thank you, everybody. Be on the lookout for the next meeting notice. We probably won't schedule it until after we see what we're gonna get for bills out of this Thursday, and then we'll go from there. And Chairman Weiler, as far as I know, we're not in any danger of missing any deadline at this point.
Well, we gotta move along. The deadline we're worried about at this point, most of these bills is March 5th. We got time.
We got time, okay.
But you've got a list of bills that might come off the calendar to get this piece from LBA.
Okay, yeah,
Yikes.
yeah,
From Melissa and Jack.
yeah, yes, I saw that, so.
So we wanna, so the reason I want you to look at those, if you find that the money's been taken out or there is no fiscal note, which quite often happens, let me know so I can waive it off,
Okay,
because I'll have to do that this Thursday. These are the bills that are on the.
okay. I'll have a quick discussion after here with you, just to see. Representative Sweeney?
Yeah, I have a question for Jack. The Senate bill, have they already passed it and it's on its way to us? Or-
The Commerce Committee passed it, and it's on the consent calendar for the next Senate session.
So we'll have the Senate bill in,
Likely a couple weeks. They're not in this week, so
okay,
I'm not sure when their next session
all right,
is.
thank you.
Keeping track.